I'm so happy that you're here today. Thank you for being a part of my day. As I gave you a heads up, there are some questions to talk about. So, firstly, how are you working your way upward?
Oh, how am I working my way upward? There's several ways through which I'm working. Right now, I think it's through inspiring others to also work their ways upward. That's the short answer.
And that's a good answer.
Yeah, to comment on this, it's you see, I got into this anti-racism work because I became a dad. Because when I came into Finland, racism was a norm to me. It was everywhere. And when I complained, everybody said, why do you bother? It's a norm. But why you worried yourself about it? It's not, this is how it is. And I accepted it. I said, okay, this is the norm. I'm going to swim with it. But then when I became a dad, I said, no, I accepted this because I came in as an immigrant. But for my daughters who were born here, I said, this can't be the norm for them. So that's why I got into this whole job. That's why I started fighting about this. My goal then was to, my goal then, even now, it was basically to make Finland better for them. So they grew up into a better Finland. And I wanted to kind of work within education because I realized that what I was trying to do was to affect the next teacher who would be anti-racism conscious in a way that when they meet them and teach them, they would understand who they are. They would teach them with the recognition that these children are as Finnish as any other. They belong here and they are above everything else. They are human beings and they deserve to be treated as human beings. A drop of black blood in their vein doesn't make them less than anyone else. That's why I got into this job. And now talking about my work at the Work Academy, as you know, I have this very interesting course which I do every year. It's called Racism, and Anti-Racism. Because I think that sometimes in Finland, the racism education is still very stuck at the level of just teaching that racism is bad, teaching about racism. And I feel like we need to do more than just teaching about racism because we are at the level, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it was okay to just teach about racism. But right now, we need to move the bar beyond just teaching about racism. We have to start teaching people to learn how to be anti-racism actors. And so for me, for that course, my goal was just to teach about the concept of racism or the concepts of anti-racism. My goal for that course was to educate people, yes, but to train them, but give them a chance to become anti-racism actors themselves. So in that particular course, I get them to choose anything of their choice, any problem of their choice. So I would say, create your own activism against this particular issue. Then I'll let them do it. I'll watch them. I'll give them feedback on their activism. And I'll say, launch your activism. And they would launch that. And the feedback they would get, they'll be very happy because they feel like they have done the work. I haven't done the work. I've helped them do the work. So they take that experience of doing the work beyond that course. And when they go out, they can say, this is an example of what I've done. It's an anti-racism project I've carried out. It's how I executed it. These are the challenges that I faced when I carried out this project. And whatever they learn from that course stays with them. So I asked the students to actually design a workshop. So instead of just creating a project, they designed several anti-racism workshops, which was very good because now they can go out after this course and offer this kind of workshops to different companies, to different people, different institutions who need this kind of training. So they can now have the skills to then offer these types of training, which I think that Finland needs. And if I go, what's the back the activism? Well, one of the things the students did in the past was they realized that international students from Africa and mostly and Asia to come in, they would need to pass these English language tests, IELTS or TOEFL, to prove that they can speak in English. And so, for example, when I took the job, the first thing I told my boss was that this language thing I can't work with it because it's outright racist. And he said, what how can you replace it? And so he gave me a chance to create something else. So what I did was I had to implement interviews as a way of testing the applicants who applied into the program, so they could apply, and I would test the language. They didn't have to go pay any corporation to test their language, and those tests don't make any sense because they expire after every 2 years, and you have to go back after every 2 years as if we forget the language after 2 years. So when the students came in, they recognized that was the problem. So what they did was 4 years ago, the first group of students wrote an open letter to Open Academy and to all other head of programs, asking them to refrain from using this language policy. Their voice was more amplified than mine because I was a single person. There were a group of students who wrote that letter. And the letter gained a lot of traction. So the traction that came from the letter made them start listening. 2 years after that, a lot of students came and they said, oh, but that letter was never answered. We're going to write our own letter. And then 2 years ago, they listened because Global Academy and University of Helsinki tasted this pilot project where there were two first universities which opened the door for what is now a norm, which is basically that students who have started completed university studies in English anywhere in the world, no restriction, can submit a certificate that shows that my university education was completed in English, and that would be enough for them to come here and study in English. So I can say that when I look at that change of policy, which is now today part of the higher education admissions policies, I can see the hand of my students in making that possible. And that makes me happy.
That is beautiful. I love that so very much. As a person who actually, I feel like guilty now. I used to be an English teacher and I used to train people for the IELTS exam, and I know how costly it is for people to be able to take. And I know how it's just imperfect. Like to say that on that one day when you paid all that money for the exam, that you'll be able to perform at that particular thing. People have all kinds of situations going on in their lives. They might get sick or anything like this might happen. And that affects your ability to go to university and to study. It's such a I would say a random thing, but it is symptomatic of exclusion in broader ways. I appreciate your students for making a change and for speaking up. I think that that's a great indicator that you're teaching people what they need to learn to be able to help other people learn in their own ways.